Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final webinar of this season. After this webinar, we'll be closed for reorganization, reimagination, reconstructing, and we will open back up with a worship service on September 9th. So we are so delighted that you're here with us today. The feature of today's webinar is our racial audit work, our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We have chosen our partner for that work, which is Culture Brokers. We think they are amazing, and we've brought them online today so that you can be introduced to them as well. We recognize that many of our churches, many of our conferences are also engaging in this work toward an anti-racist church, and we are so glad we're doing that work together. So my name is Reverend Traci Blackmon. I am the Associate General Minister of Justice and Local Church Ministries for the United Church of Christ. And I am overjoyed to be joined today by our President of the United Church of Christ Board, Yvette Wynn, who the United Church of Christ Board is the ones who are commissioning this work, and she'll have much to say in just a moment. And also our other partner in this work is the Council of Conference Ministers, and the chair of the conference is with us as well, Gordon Rankin. And we are so excited that we are doing this work together because it speaks to what we want to happen in the church. We recognize that we are congregational in our polity. We do not speak for our churches, neither do we want to, but we want to engage in this process in such a level of transparency that we invite you into our story. And seeing our story, we hope, will be encouraging and motivating in the work that you are doing. And we want to hear what you're doing so that we can learn from one another. So what I'd like to do is open this conversation by introducing all four of the guests for today, and then asking a few questions of Yvette and Gordon, and then turning it over to the president of Culture Brokers, Lisa Tabor, who will take us through an introduction of what they do, how they do it, and how they do it so well. Then we will have an opportunity for questions from the chat. And I want to apologize now. I know that I'm a little overdressed on the top for this webinar, but we are sponsoring an event, the United Church of Christ is, and there's just a little overlap, and you'll be in gracious hands with Yvette Wynn, who will be leading this conversation in my absence for your questions. So welcome, deep breath, inhale and exhale. And I want to start with you, Yvette. We are so grateful to you and to the United Church of Christ Board for seeing the necessity for us not to just be a church that looks at racial justice outwardly, but a church that is courageous enough to look on the inside. The scripture says, create in us a clean heart. And we want to look at our own heart, at our policies and our praxis. Can you give greetings to the people who are joining us today, as well as share with us the impetus for the United Church of Christ Board voting unanimously for us to do this work?
Absolutely, Traci. I'm so excited to be here. The United Church of Christ Board, which I am the chair for the 2019 to 2021 biennium, excitedly joins in this work and calls on this work. Just a bit of background about me. I am a member of a local church in New York, Community Church in the Pelhams, and also an associate member of Holy Covenant UCC. So just wanted to give greetings and to everyone who is joining us. Thank you so much. So the why now? I think, it's many reasons. First of all, this is not new work in some ways to the United Church of Christ. We have been committed to racial equity, I think as long as the church has existed. And we've done it through General Synod pronouncements, all of the historical firsts that many of us who have been UCCers for a long time are so familiar with. It's part of who we are. I think, everything from ordaining the first Black minister or the first openly gay minister in the 1970s, breaking barriers in terms of communication. I was thinking this morning about even what happened with George Floyd and what we might have missed had it not been captured on social media, right? And I think about Everett Parker, who broke through barriers in the 50s in communication so that stories of Black and Brown people could get out. I think we have to just continue to be diligent, and this is the next step in that intention. I think about last year, during the protests, the United Church of Christ Board made a statement about anti-racism, and I was looking at it this morning because it really speaks to this moment. And I had just a little small snippet that I wanted to share. It said, "This is our time to show our solidarity with all who live at the margins of our country because of their identities. We are called now to build a strong anti-racist commitment. We are called to build a strong anti-racist commitment in our church so that we can show that Black lives matter in the kingdom of God. It is time to see ourselves as God sees us. Jesus is risen and alive in each one of us. May we use the strength to be agents of change." And so I think about that in terms of where we are now, right? We are agents of change. We are moving forward, not sitting in what was, but what can be. And so the board is very excited about this work. You know, Traci and Gordon, as you serve on the board, that every meeting that we have had since we made that statement and we called on this work, we have connected with this conversation. We have given updates to the board. The board has had a chance to say yes. So we walk forward together, and, Lisa will potentially speak to the fact that the RFP was last fall and we selected culture brokers this year. So we know that this was not something quick, right? We didn't just take the first name, that we look thoroughly at who our partner in this work would be to make sure that we were selecting the right choice for us. And I'm so thankful that we selected culture brokers who we believe are the best partners for us for this first phase. So that's what I'm excited about. I think that's what the board is excited about. And thank you so much for this webinar today and the chance to share more about this important work.
Thank you, Yvette. And one of the reasons we're doing a webinar as we prepare to go into General Synod is because General Synod is virtual this year. And so everything has to be just time crunched just perfectly so that we're not spending all of every day on Zoom or on the webinar. So we were given 7 minutes to talk about this work, and that was never going to do. So you will see a 7-minute commercial, but we wanted the opportunity for you to engage with our partners. And I'm coming to you in just a moment, Gordon. Yvette, I want to ask you to speak a little bit about that process because you alluded to it. Can you share a little bit about how many were on the task force and what took us so long and how many people applied to be in the position that Culture Brokers is now in?
Absolutely. I believe we had 8 or 9 submissions. Ultimately, I believe 7 were deemed to be complete. The committee that I appointed really encompassed many leaders from across the church. And so I don't want to leave anyone out, but we had, former general minister and president. We had quorum, which represents many different identities within the church. We had members of the board. We had a conference minister. We had staff, Elda Love, who's our racial justice minister, and Kent Salati. We really looked at very deeply, and I don't want to leave anybody out. So Traci, if I did, please lift them up. Disabilities ministry, we also had them represented on the committee. So, it was really to try to understand, to hear the voices that we knew we didn't want to miss, right? Because while we're talking about racism and thinking a lot about Black and white, it's really bigger than that. And so making sure that we had representation at the table that would give us a broad perspective. And we met regularly, I think probably monthly. And we really looked at all of the presentations in a very deep way, decided who we were going to actually interview. Had interviews that ran in some cases a couple of hours, to really make sure that we had vetted all the questions that we had, and really understood the work that each of our prospective partners had already done and what they would do in our setting, because we do have a bit of a unique setting in the United Church of Christ. Our polity is not the same as some other denominations. So really, making sure it was going to be a fit with kind of who we are. And then there was some discernment about what would this first phase encompass, right? There's the audit, but then there's the ongoing work, and making sure that we were clear about what we wanted for this first phase, which is what Culture Brokers really focuses on, is that audit, that assessment, so that we could understand who we are, right? How do others see us? Who are we? So that we could really have that critical look and identify those next steps in terms of what we need to do. So I think that the committee that we had did that very thoughtfully, and asked really good questions at each stage of our discernment.
Thank you so much, Yvette. And Gordon, we are so glad that you are with us today as well. Can you share with us, first I want to acknowledge that there are many conferences that are ahead of us in doing this phase of the work. We're so glad to have the partnership of all of the conference ministers who voted unanimously to support this work as the Council of Conference Ministers. Can you talk a little bit about why this work is important to the Council of Conference Ministers, and engage us a little bit on what's already going on in conferences?
Thank you, Traci. It's so exciting to be at the point that we can have this conversation today. I'm delighted to tell you a little bit about this work from the perspective of the Council of Conference Ministers. So in August, when the board decided to pursue exploring this project, a few months later, the Council of Conference Ministers wrote a letter that we shared through our conference newsletters with all of the church, basically saying three things. One, that we celebrate this work, that we think this is the right time, in some cases perhaps beyond the right time, to be engaged in this work. And we affirm the board's decision, but truly celebrate that we as a church can be engaged in this type of exploration. We said that in celebrating this, that we also needed to be engaged in this type of self-reflection, and our accepting the partnership of the UCC board to engage in this work is our following through on that statement that we too, as conference ministers and as the Council of Conference Ministers collaboratively, need to be engaged in this type of exploration. And what does this mean for how we engage individually and collectively in the work that we do and as leaders of the church? I will also say, when the third thing that we had said in the letter was that we believe that this is work for the whole of the church, that it is work for the United Church of Christ Board in national setting, it is work for the Council of Conference Ministers, but this work also needs to be engaged if we're truly to be the type of anti-racist church that we feel ourselves called to be. We need to engage in this in conferences and associations and local churches, and invited those settings of the church to consider how we all might engage in this. When we agreed to partner with the board, we raised lots of questions that are still questions to be answered about how, particularly for us, our conference settings might engage in this work in new ways, or might continue our engagement in this work. Mm-hmm. Answering the question of how conferences are engaged in this, it is so broadly done at right now. I mean, part of the uniqueness of our polity is we all find our places and ways to step into this. We have some conferences that have started some serious consideration of some of this racial audit work. We have some conferences that are saying, hey, does this provide me an opportunity where my conference can tag into what we're doing? We have conferences looking at this from some particular vantage points of immigration, of justice around legal issues. All of those type of points. So it's really varied. Our conference ministers want to ask the question of how can we as church leaders and we as leaders in our conference can engage in this and invite our boards and invite the folks in our conferences to trickle that question down even further and say, how can we as a whole church engage this type of work?
Thank you so much for that, Gordon. And that was a tricky question because there are 36 conferences and 36 personalities, but we're grateful that all the conference ministers agreed to come to this place. I know that you are here to hear from culture brokers, and I am so excited to see people still signing on from Hawaii, from Massachusetts, from Connecticut, from Chicago, Illinois, from St. Louis, Missouri, from Nashville, Tennessee, from Tampa, Florida, from Delano, Minnesota. So there is interest in this work across the breadth of our denomination. 151 people are online already. Washington, D.C. is here. Corin Ministries are here. The Disabilities Ministries are here because we care about this work. I'm not going to take up too much more time, but I do want to explain something to you. We are not unaware of the fact that we are a predominantly white denomination, that we are 85% white. We want you to understand that this work for us is a journey, and it's a journey that we have been on for quite a long time. And we have made some progressive moves in this journey. We have done things that are as radical as raising $1 million to support the legal work of the Wilmington 10 until they were released. We've done work like suspending the General Synod and marching with Cesar Chavez and the farmers. We have done work that helped us support the Amistad Revolt and stand with those who were being enslaved until the Supreme Court rendered them free. We have done this kind of work. We're not coming to it new, and we're not coming to this work as completely anti-Black. We are coming to this work to decenter white dominance, to decenter whiteness, meaning that we're also going to be dealing with anti-Asian discrimination, Indigenous people discrimination, Hispanic, Latinx discrimination. All across the board, we are interested in becoming an anti-racist church. And that's important that we understand from the foundation. Another thing that has been a common question, so I want to dispel it right away, is when you look at the national setting and when you look at the United Church of Christ Board, we are some of the most diverse representation of the United Church of Christ. We do pay quite a lot of attention to having diversity in every area of leadership, including the Council of Conference Ministers. And so it is important that we understand that anti-racism is not just about how many variations of a hue you have in a place. It is not about how many colors we place in a box. That doesn't matter to anyone but Crayola. You've heard me say that before. What we are after is transformed minds, transformation that causes us to have an anti-racist ethos, no matter who is sitting in our pew. And we believe that if we are able to do that through the breadth of the church, then all the other variations of diversity we seek will come. I want to introduce you now to two people who have really shifted our thinking. Yvette, you didn't talk about this because I didn't ask you, quite frankly, but the question that also resides with us is that when we began this work, we thought that we would hire an organization to take us on a 5-year journey. And in the interview processes, we found out that we needed to take our time. That happened in the dialogue. And we decided to start with this audit, which is an assessment of the national setting and the United Church of Christ Board, not just of what we look like, but how we operate, our practices, our praxis, how we are seen by those who interact with us. a 360-degree look at ourselves, at our ethos, at our language, to make sure that we are who we say we are. And we are so grateful to you, Lisa, and to you, Earl, for saying yes to taking this journey with us. I know that you have a presentation prepared for us. Lisa Tabor and Earl Ross, I believe now are co-chairs of Culture Brokers. I think I heard that in the last time. You'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. But we have been delighted with our interactions with them so far, and we are absolutely amazed with what they're bringing to the table. So if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Traci, everyone. I'm Lisa Tabor. We are absolutely thrilled to be able to help you on your journey. We're humbled, in fact, and a little nervous because this feels like a very big job now. All of a sudden, it was very manageable earlier, but now it feels like, wow, we have a lot to live up to, and we will do our best to live up to that. I want to make sure that Earl gets a chance to introduce himself, and we are actually the president. I'm the president and owner of Culture Brokers, and Earl is the vice president now. But we absolutely are best when we operate in tandem. So I'm also grateful that you're able to allow Earl to come along with me. I think some of the background we'll give you a bio, make sure that you have all that info, but I want to be upfront in saying that I personally do not have a lot of experience with religious groups. This is now our third religious group out of 101 clients. And again, very humble, thankful that you're willing to trust us in helping you on your journey. And so with that, I am learning. I'm trying to pay attention and be adaptive to your particular vocabulary and culture, while still helping you get better at that culture, right? And more inclusive. So I want to be honest about where I am in my journey and understanding your setting and your culture as a religious institution. I will let Earl introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I am, again, as Lisa said, deeply, deeply humbled by the opportunity to work with you. And because we really want to get to the presentation, but I wanted just to say that I am coming to this work from varied background, but as one that has not just worked in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also working in youth justice reform across the states, including states like Wisconsin, Louisiana, Minnesota, working with foundations like the Annie Casey Foundation and the W. Hayward Burns Institute. So coming to this work through that lens, as well as coming from a perspective that, while Lisa says is not rooted in it, for me coming to this work and being a part of a family that, though not UCC, has been deeply immersed in the witness of Christ and the witness of radical ministry, if you will. And so I am delighted, and I've said this before, and overwhelmed by what UCC is doing and has done, and has just been just extraordinarily excited about being able to, again, walk along this journey with you.
Thank you. Right before you all start, I want to address something that you said, Lisa, and you said, Earl, that I don't think we've said to you in our meetings. So let's start the transparency now. One of the reasons that you were chosen is because you don't know the UCC. We had many who applied, who had assumptions about the UCC, who already had preconceived notions about what we needed and how we needed it. And so we are looking forward to this first phase of the work being us educating you as much as you're educating us. So don't be nervous about that part. What we want you to be an expert at is the work you're bringing to us. And we're going to share with you the way our polity works in hopes that we'll be able to get the work done without preconceived notions or biases about this denomination. Does that make sense?
That is wonderful. Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Great. With that, then let's go ahead and launch our presentation. This may feel very quick, very fast. I'm going to cover a lot because I have the opportunity to do so with a large group, but know that we will be in front of you again on a regular basis. Our philosophy is to make sure that we are engaging everyone who has a stake in the outcomes of the work, and everyone who has a role to play in delivering the results that the organization is looking for. And we want to make sure that we're bringing everyone along at the sort of the same pace that we're moving at. So we will be back in front of you, and I will hopefully I will definitely have an opportunity to dig deeper into some of the things that I'll be sharing with you today. But a nice overview today, which will be relatively quick. The question that UCC board came to us with is, how do we in the national setting discern barriers to full inclusion in the denomination, including both governance and decision making? And then how do we design and implement programs and services to address those barriers? And I like to think that we are the perfect organization to help you do that. Our mission has always been to build inclusive environments in organizations and systems. And when I say inclusive environments, I'm not just talking about the interpersonal relationships. In fact, for us, that is somewhat secondary because most organizations have already spent lots of time trying to develop that interpersonal relationship. Where organizations have tended to spend very little time is in building the structural supports around people and around trying to make sure that people are engaging in the right behaviors that will deliver equitable outcomes. We have had the lovely experience of working with more than 100 organizations. And in fact, UCC is 101 officially, makes 101. So we're super thrilled. And the organizations have been varied. We have worked with organizations of all sizes, from thousands of employees to only one. We have, and you know, that organization had a lot of volunteers, so free employees, if you will. But we have also worked with organizations across the United States. We do some work in Europe, and we have worked in organizations that are nonprofit, foundations, government agencies, and businesses as well. So again, super thrilled, but only our third religious institution. And actually all three now will be institutions that have done assessments. So we're also, thank you so much, building a wealth of knowledge about where religious institutions especially may be having common challenges and common strengths, and building a network. Eventually we'll hopefully have a network of religious institutions that can share, you know, the things that have been working for them and network. The value that we bring in having all of that broad experience is that we're able to understand what gets results, no matter what the organizational situation is. So what we've learned is that there are certain things that happen in a business that they can do to get equity results that also we have seen does work in nonprofits or does work in government. So we're really looking for those common processes to improve to get results, no matter what the environment is, no matter what the situation or sector is. And that points right to our purpose, which is to help you get real results as fast as possible, so right away. And the kinds of work that we do with our clients include, in order to get to those real results, include helping them develop the framework around equity, diversity, inclusion, wherever they're at, building a common philosophy that is shared across the organization and also with their partners, vendors, and other stakeholders. And then helping to build the leadership capacity to govern with that framework. We also help organizations build the integrated systems that will get those results. There's no system that operates in a silo. We like to try sometimes to have systems operate in silos, but we know life is complex and any change in one area is going to affect the other areas. So we look at how changes need to be integrated and therefore sort of maximize or magnify the effect so that you can get to those results faster. Also making sure that the quality of the service or the product or deliverables that you're trying to, or the space that you're creating, whatever that is high quality no matter who is in that space. And also managing risks. It's an organization and you have people and there are all sorts of risks that can happen. And we want to help we do help our organizations think ahead to what are the implications of the work that we're doing or the outcome that we are trying to achieve, and how can we mitigate to make sure that if there are potential negative implications, that we are thinking ahead and trying to minimize those, or at the very best to not have those happen at all. And then finally, we want to expedite that high performance. Again, we're looking for real results right away. And let's be honest, the damage that has been done to communities of color has been a long history of that, and we cannot wait to improve that situation, to get to equity. So we have a sense of urgency, meaning that we're trying to set up the structural influences and organizations to get to those results as fast as possible, including having very particular kind of strategic action plan, clear expectations, making sure the right people are in the right places, and ultimately improving those structural components of the organization. I want to emphasize that issue, what I've been saying about structure. Organizations tend to work mostly from the perspective that we need to help individuals. We need to help them be smarter, more knowledgeable, more motivated to change, and also creating some the social environment to support that. But without the structural supports around those people, what you often find are people who can be quite competent and motivated, but run up against policies and practices that completely shut them down. So we want to make sure, again, that those policies, practices, and situations are in place that support the right kinds of behaviors and support individual motivation. So we're closing that circle when we work with our clients. I'm going to pause there for a second and let Earl talk, because you might be tired of his hearing me. Earl, can you jump in here?
Sure. So thank you, Lisa. And I'm also tracking some of the questions that are coming through. So keep them coming. We appreciate that. So when we think about for us, so as Lisa says, in terms of structure, when we think about equity, and when we work with organizations, irrespective of the size, right, of the organizations, we are very clear about trying to get to how we are going to define equity. And for us, equity is not just something that's static. It's really about the results that we're looking for from those organizations that include, again, not just the organizations themselves, but also the communities in which those communities are connecting with. So for us, results are described around things like what are the opportunities that avail themselves? How accessible are the services and the engagement for those who are coming to it? What's the quality of that? And when we talk about quality, again, it is the quality defined in a way that's not just about how we would assume, but how folks come to it and think about what is good, what is quality, what is valuable, what is fairness. And these last two, which is something that often doesn't get incorporated into the sense of equity, and fortunately, more and more folks are talking about it. But that's this aspect of justice. To what extent is the harm, when we're talking about that, and to what extent is that are we prepared to repair that harm or that's been done, and to the extent we're able to restore it. I often will say to organizations, when organizations can get to the repairing and the restoration, we are at that advanced level of engaging and thinking about this work, and that's where we want our organizations to get to.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much, Earl. So in helping organizations get to these results, these equity results, we have found through our experience that we can use standardized approaches that deliver customized results that are tailored and specific to your organization. And for which the intent is to increase equity in racial, ethnic, and cultural groups. So in order to get those results and engage in those standardized processes that deliver those tailored results for you, we have an equity theorem, and the equity theorem does a couple of things for us that we like to share with you. It defines very clearly some of these terms that are often sort of tossed about and can be quite used in an ambiguous way. We want to use some discipline in the wording that we use, the terms that we use. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking about different characteristics, and we do our best to not use the word diversity as a code word for people of color. We want to be very clear that diversity means variety, period. And the variety needs to be defined by the organization. And the particular variety the organization wants to improve needs to be clearly defined by that organization. Then we have the word inclusion, right, or the term inclusion. That is strictly reserved for behaviors that are about interactions between individuals, groups, and between people and things, such as the internet, right, such as technology. Those two things for us need to happen in tandem, and they need to both happen. And so you cannot get to equity, we believe, by only having a diverse workforce without being inclusive, and vice versa. And then our work is to help you use the magnifier of discipline to actually achieve the results that you're talking about. So we introduce structure and rigor to your work. That's not to say that you don't probably already have some, but what we have found is that even for organizations that do have some discipline, there's some improvement that can be made there. So I'm not going to go through the entire list of discipline. We will send out this, you have the recording, and we will send out the PowerPoint as well. But just know that we have a very systematic way that we're looking at helping your organization install discipline into its equity work so that it does get those results quickly and sustainably. I think the other thing that I want to reiterate is that our process does involve everyone. This is going to maybe look a little different for your organization because we haven't gotten to that stage yet of how we're actually going to involve everyone and in what ways. But this is one example of a common way that our clients involve, or we all involve everyone in the process of assessing the organization, of making decisions, and finally of getting those results. So we engage stakeholders, not just you all, but other stakeholders, including vendors, partners, funders, community members, maybe who aren't a part of your community, but the broader community. And as Traci said earlier, this is a 360-degree assessment. We need to know how those stakeholders experience your organization, what they see, and what they get to interact with as far as policy, practice, and built environments. And we have very clear roles for different groups within the organization. So there's senior leadership roles, there's roles for subject matter experts, roles for board and staff, roles for congregations, conferences, associations. We will figure that all out. Be rest assured that you will be involved. So we have all of these ways that we're doing the work, but specific to you, there's two challenges that we're going to be addressing, and I want to share with you the approach we're going to be using. So the first challenge is that discernment of barriers to full inclusion at the national setting level. Again, focus on policy and practice. So we're going to be using our proprietary tool called the Diamond Inclusiveness Assessment. This examines 64 policies, practices, and situations in the organization at the national setting level, and helps to identify the dimensions. So we have 8 dimensions there, the dimensions that are strong, the dimensions that are weaker, and then we will also be able to analyze or determine where there might be areas of further opportunity for development connected to your current strategies and that kind of thing. The Diamond Inclusiveness Assessment organizes these 64 structural components, the policies, practices, and situations, into 8 dimensions that you can see here. Built environment, cultural capital, which is your internal organizational culture and the extent to which that is inclusive. Financial investment, where's your money go? Where are you getting it from? Is that all equitable? Human capital is normally what you would kind of think probably more naturally about regarding equity, diversity, inclusion. What's the diversity of the staff? What's the diversity of the congregation? And as well as how are you developing your human capital? And then natural environment, political capital, how are decisions made? Who gets to make rules and hold people accountable? And then social capital is about networks and interactions, not just inside the organization, but also between the organization and other organizations. And then spiritual capital is actually not about religion, but what it is about is that sort of the extent to which individuals are willing to step out of their own space and be helpful to others, to the extent to which there's some happiness, right? People really enjoy being around each other, and the sort of softer side of things. The Diamond Inclusiveness Assessment then, with this analysis, yields some insights. I'm just going to quickly touch on a few graphs that you will see once you get your results. So the way, again, the assessment itself is a 360-degree assessment. So I'll say this about that. Not everyone is going to get to be surveyed. There's just not enough money, I don't think, to be able to survey every single person, and we don't need to. What will happen is there will be a list generated by the senior leaders of people who will be invited to participate, curated to get the broadest diversity. And again, diversity is not code for only people of color. Diversity means literally the widest variety of characteristics that are meaningful to the organization. And so essentially they're curating a group of people who will be responding to the DIA. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only way that we get information. We'll get information from the DIA survey, but the second thing we'll also be doing is having debriefing sessions with those results, where we will collect the context behind those results from anyone who's interested in participating in that. So you will have chances at 2 different levels to participate in giving us the result, the information in order to lead to these results. So just quickly, one of the things that you will find from these results is there we go, what's the area of strength for inclusiveness in your organization, and what is the area of weakness? Where's the lowest inclusion happening? You will also be able to see more and more granular information related to the Diamond Inclusiveness Assessment. So yes, you will be able to see that there is a particular area of strength here, or dimension of strength, but also why is that a dimension of strength? Yes, it had high agreement. There was also low don't know, and low does not, low disagree. So I'm not going to spend time digging into what the DIA actually means, because there will be another opportunity where you'll get to dig in further. But I want to give you an idea of the kinds of quantitative information that will be generated from this and how it will be used. And that's the key for us, is being able to use this information to make very thoughtful, strategic decisions about where to invest the organization's resources so that it achieves the results it wants with excellence. And you can only do that with a few things, right, at any given time. So all of this is about finding those very strategic first improvements to be making and investing in with excellence. And so we even get further into the very specific policies, practices, and situations, and you will then be able to find out within a particular dimension, what are the policies and practices and situations that are strengths, what are weaknesses and opportunities for improvement. Finally, the second challenge that we're going to be helping you with is using that information to design and implement programs at that national setting level to address the barriers, or to make the improvements that you want to make in a way that will get you measurable results as fast as possible, and in a sustainable way that you can continue to improve. So we will do that by then moving into and helping you create an equity strategic action plan. That's what we call it. That might not be what the term you actually land on, but for us, this means equity is the right, is the outcome. Strategic, meaning that you're not going to boil the ocean. You're going to focus in on the fewest, most impactful improvements to make with excellence within a time bound, a certain time frame, and we like to see a year. And you're going to act, right? And that's a plan that gets you right into action right away. So this is the thing that we find helps install that culture of organizational discipline, even stronger than some organizations that already have real great discipline around data and reporting and all of that. And so this will provide that structure to change those policies, practices, and situations. And it looks something like this. This is an example from the city of Minneapolis, where we did the equity strategic action plan for them. It includes your rationale for improvement, deadlines, milestones, who's accountable, what resources do you need, etc. So you will get that really nice package based on the information that we collect from the DIA. And finally, our intention is to position you to immediately act on that plan. And we will be there with you for at least 6 months, helping to coach the teams who are executing the plan as well, to make sure that we're helping address any issues that might come up that we hadn't thought about before. And that's, I will not necessarily spend time talking about an example of some of the outcomes. You can see this on your own, because I want to make sure we have 8 minutes left to answer your questions. So let's do it right now.
All right, let's do it. We're so excited. We got lots of great questions, which, we just put in the chat. We won't get to them all, but I'll just start at the beginning. Can you speak to the specific industries and specific clients that are the 100 clients you work with? So maybe an overview of who is your typical client?
Yeah, the specific industries we tend to, we have environment, climate change and environment, advocacy, healthcare, mental health, special needs, homelessness, affordable housing, construction, not construction yet, hopefully next, theater, performance, just a wide range. And our client logos you saw in one of the first slides, that will be in our presentation, so you can take a look at them.
Right, yeah. And I would add, again, it's also in terms of jurisdictions, so cities, as
Yeah.
well as agencies, state agencies and county agencies.
Yeah, City of
Great.
Minneapolis, state of Minnesota organizations. Yep.
Wonderful. Next question. Thanks for hosting the webinar and introducing us to the concept of racial audits. It's important for the national setting to set an example by doing its own unmasking of racism work, and then calling on others. Will culture brokers be available to train the UCC to do similar audit work for local churches? So I think we've talked about what this might look like, but I don't know that we've landed on a way to do this, but certainly we want to engage the church. I don't know, Traci or Gordon, if you would add anything.
I think that's absolutely correct, Yvette, that it's a question that we are tossing around among us, but we're at the beginning of exploring that. We've got a lot of exploring to go before we can fully answer that question.
Great. How does your work differ depending on the size of the organization? What's the largest organization that you work with?
A couple thousand employees. It's the HCA out of Nashville, Tennessee. So many years ago, so the largest private healthcare company in the US at the time.
And I would also say that we've worked with counties. And so if we talk about the size of counties like a Ramsey County, specifically working with communities of color, but also with various departments within the justice system and human services, that's hundreds of thousands. I mean, in terms of the influence, yeah.
Right, the reach of those
Right, yep,
municipalities.
yeah.
Does the assessment include a review of how the national setting will engage money, like how vendors are chosen, the places where contributions are made, where investment dollars are placed, even where, like, how we purchase routine supplies, so vendor management?
Lisa, I was going to say, I love this question. And I feel like we've kind of, yes, to the extent that it is a part of the 8 dimensions, that financial investment is exactly what we are interrogating when we're asking that question. And I think from that, depending on what we land on in terms of the prioritization, is doing that very thing. How are you investing dollars around equity, diversity, inclusion? To what extent are you investing in vendors and other organizations that connect with the UCC national setting?
And I just I'm always really careful to manage expectations. So I want to clarify what Earl said, is that to a certain extent that's a question that's asked in the DIA. However, ultimately it's the decision of the senior leaders to focus in on what they're actually going to improve. And that leads, whatever they're going to improve leads to further digging in and understanding what's the situation that needs to be improved and how to do it.
Yeah. I'm just going to power through, maybe try to get one more because I know we're running up on time. How can you help us in the area of leadership, culture, and how local congregations view our denomination?
That might be one we can't answer very quickly.
I thought I put it out there. I think that that's something that we're going to discern together, right? That is going to come out of the work. How can we lead in this space, right? When we engage local congregations, there'll be potentially activities that help us to build on those leadership gifts. But we can certainly follow up and think more about that because I don't want to minimize it, but I'm just going to maybe ask one more. With the organizations you've already worked with, did you find that most of them needed to rewrite their bylaws to address some of the findings?
It depends on where. I would say that most of them had to rewrite policies or toss policies or start new policies. Bylaws, for the most part, haven't been a big change. Outside of maybe some of my clients have rewritten their bylaws to ensure there's greater diversity on their board.
Okay.
I'd say that's probably most common.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're right at time because I see it's like 5:59. So I want to thank you. This was so fabulous. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Earl. Thank you, Traci, for organizing this. We have a wonderful support behind the scenes in Chris Davies. Thank you, Gordon. We're going to leave you with a closing prayer as you continue on in your day. We're going to circle back with the answers to some of these incredibly thoughtful questions because some of them are just too deep to delve into here. So before we go to the final prayer, I'll just open it up for Traci. Any final thoughts?
Sure. A couple of things I want to say. I echo the gratitude for everything that has happened here and recognizing that an hour is only an hour. And what Lisa said earlier is something we are planning to put into this process. So when we come back from our sabbatical for webinars, we will have hopefully a routine time for you to engage this work as we go forward. Some of that time will be with Lisa and Earl present, and some of it will be with Yvette, myself, and Gordon and other representatives present, depending on what we're working on. What I want you to hold on to is that this is the launch of a process that we hope to be on for many years. We want to be an anti-racist church, and that is not going to be an assessment and done. It is a process. So the places you want us to engage that you're asking about are the places we want to engage, but it is a process and it will take us time. We are starting at the place of making sure that we look at ourselves clearly. We swim in this water. So we're asking someone who is not in our water to come and help us evaluate the water. How toxic is it? And it is toxic because we all live in a racist world. I want to start there. Thank you all for coming. And I want to also make you aware of something that's happening at General Synod. Jennifer, if you're around, if you'll put the slide up really quickly. As you know, we are launching Join the Movement at General Synod, which is all about racial justice. And the racial audit work will also be on the Join the Movement webinar portal, which will be introduced at Synod. If you are coming to General Synod, we want to make sure that you know about the Valerie Russell Scholarship Luncheon. We have it every General Synod, but this year the speaker is directly connected to the work that we're doing here. Her name is Joy DeGrew. She is located in California. She is most famous for her work around post-traumatic slave syndrome and is now doing healing work around racial justice as well. We are excited to have her. The UCC is not monolithic. She is not of our denomination, is not of our faith. She's Baha'i, as a matter of fact, but she does incredible work. And the Valerie Russell Luncheon is still available for you to register. We have 285 people registered already for that. And we will be launching a special edition Valerie Russell pin. Those of you who are traditionally UCC know that Valerie Russell led some of the justice work for the United Church of Christ and died in that office at the age of 55. And so we honor her at every General Synod with a luncheon and scholarship presentations that honor lay leadership in the church. So we invite you to come to hear what Dr. DeGrew has to say as well, and to take this journey with us and Culture Brokers to assess where we are so that we can plan together a roadmap forward. And I am most excited about the fact that all three dimensions of the elected leadership of the United Church of Christ, the Council of Conference Ministers, the United Church of Christ Board, and the national setting are in unanimous agreement that we must become an anti-racist church, because that is the only thing that is faithful to the gospel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Traci. And Gordon, if you would pray us into the next stage of our day.
Friends, let us hear God's blessing upon us. This has been an exciting and somewhat overwhelming time to step into this work. God bless us as we begin a journey that will last for many, many years, if not lifetimes. Bless us as we begin this new partnership with Culture Brokers and seek to learn from one another about what it fully means to see all as your beloved. Bless us as the United Church of Christ as we step into General Synod and share this news and so much more of what it means to be your church. Bless our gathering together and our parting, that all may be about your service. This we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Siblings and sisters and brothers in Christ, if this conversation has moved you, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or your soul, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed into the rest of your day and know that you are not alone, and we are holding you in prayer. Amen.